Well, I didn't have a chance to tell any jokes before the program, which I try to do to get everyone happy because this is a very serious topic. But actually, Josiah Tattnall, three, was the son of a governor of Georgia, and his father was a royal governor of Georgia, who actually, when the Revolutionary War broke out, he took his family back to England, waited out the war, and came back to their estate. Their estate was on the St. Mary's River, and it's called Bonaventure. And that is also, Bonaventure is now one of the largest graveyards in Savannah. And believe it or not, it is where that monument is that is from the movie Good Night, what is it? Good Night in the Garden of Good and Evil. Right? You may have seen that movie. Midnight, that's right. I have to remember my history, not so much that stuff. But and he's buried right near that, headstone. So anyway, Josiah Tattnall, dashing, daring, and devoted to his nation, he was known throughout the Navy as the beau idea of a naval officer. His imposing stature and dedicated service made Tattnall a legendary figure, almost 6 feet tall, with a huge head, sunken blue eyes, and a protruding lower lip. Tattnall's great strength and rather long arms made him a cutlass expert, okay? And so he actually, as one naval officer said, he possessed all of the traits that are found in heroic characters, and with suitable opportunities would have set his name amongst the great worthies who are historic. Well, he's going to be born 9 November 1795. This is while he is just turned into a captain or promoted to a captain. Of course, as I mentioned, his father was governor of Georgia. He's also senator from Georgia. So when his father died, he was 10 years old. They sent him to England, and he studied at Eton. And so his father had studied at Eton. His grandfather had studied at Eton. So, this was pretty good. So he was under the guidance of his great aunt, and so he did well in school, came back to the United States at age 12, and he then proceeded to join the Navy. He is named midshipman at Savannah, and then he is assigned to the Washington Navy Yard. There at the Washington Navy Yard, he will be then detailed to take command of the Constellation, which is one of those 6 fast frigates that were built in the late 1790s. So he's a midshipman. His captain is Charles Stewart, who is, great naval officer. So he's planning to go on a raid against the British. And so he comes down the Chesapeake Bay, and right as he nears about Wolf Trap's Shoals, which is near the mouth of the York River, he will see the entire British fleet coming in with the weather gauge. So he has no choice but to try and get into Norfolk before they get to him. And he does kegging, he does everything, masterful sails, seamanship, and he does make it into Norfolk, where he will anchor under the guns of Fort Norfolk. Now, the British are commanded by Sir John Borlase Warren, and his second in command is Sir George Cockburn, and Cockburn is really hated throughout America. In fact, they called him Cockburn because he strutted around the bay and burned everywhere he went. So he wants to capture Norfolk, and the Americans, very poor defenses. We have Fort Norfolk, which you can visit today, And then also there was a blockhouse on Craney Island. Craney Island's much smaller today, back then, than it is today. So it was large mud flats. So the Constellation sends some of its sailors onto Craney Island to man the main battery, and with U.S. Army artillerists, also local militiamen. And so they have 600 men against 1,500 British. And the British plan is to cross what is called the thoroughfare, it no longer exists, that divides Craney Island from the main landmass. And so they have a fort there. And then the English also want to attack using barges, right? And so they have a lot of barges. The biggest one has 24 oars, painted lime green. It's called the Centipede. And it's commanded by Sir George Hansard, the illegitimate son of George III. He goes into battle with an umbrella over his head, didn't want to get burned, right? Champagne and strawberries, because he was having a lark against the Yankees, as he would say. Well, he gets hit by a cannonball in the leg and he'll die later. Actually, his barge will get stuck in the mud, and Tattnall, he's how old is he? 15 years old, and he leads the men through the mudflats and captures the Centipede. You know, he's considered a great hero. The state of Georgia gives him a sword for his heroic actions. So this is why we say he's dashing and very important leader. Now, he will also fight with the Barbary pirates, and in doing so, he will actually participate in the capture of the Masada and the brig Estedo, which are two major Moorish gunboats. And so he's promoted to lieutenant in 1818. He will then attend Partridge Military School. Now, I'm sure you haven't heard of this, but it later becomes known as Norwich Military Academy, and because it moves from Connecticut to Vermont. Okay, so, and the big thing was he wanted to learn deportment, all these other things, because it had a naval department, army department. So when he goes there, he is in Middleton, Connecticut. So then, after he graduates from that school in 1821, he will go to England and marry his mother's cousin, Henrietta Fenwick. Okay, you know, keep it all in the family. And then he takes command of the USS Jackal and to suppress pirates in the West Indies. He actually will join the Coastal Survey in the Erie, and he maps the dry Tortugas, those keys that are below Key West, and actually he selects where to put a fort, which is now known as Fort Jefferson. It's 16 million bricks it took to build that fort. So it's pretty amazing. So he will actually capture a Mexican schooner while doing this survey work that was known as the Marzuma, which had actually captured an American merchantman. And so he boards the ship, you know, once again, these long arms, tall man, 6'1", you know, you can well imagine, you know, he's amazing to jump on the deck and say, surrender. And so he, as a result of all of this, he gets promoted to commander in 1836, and he becomes a national hero when he's commander of the Pioneer. This is the Constellation, of course. This is the blockhouse at Craney Island where Tattnall was at the beginning of the battle. This is the Empire, which he serves in when he's in the Mediterranean. This is the Macedonian. and he also serves as executive officer on this ship. And he will actually be executive officer of this ship as well, the Constitution. So he gets all these great appointments. However, when he is command of the bark Pioneer, he will return President Antonio de Santa of Mexico, the president of Mexico, right? And he, after the War of Texas Independence, Santa Anna is going to be captured, and the Texans want to do him harm, and yet Tattnall shows up in Galveston, says, no, we need to, this guy's president of the other nation, he might have been bad, but we need to return him. And the Texans all go, sure, it's, he was an imposing person. So I have to say, in the 1840s, he will be commandant of the Charleston Navy Yard. He will, it's called Charleston Navy Yard, but it was in Boston. Charleston is a little town in the suburbs, and the Navy had a bad habit of naming their naval yards not after the real town they're at, Boston, instead the suburbs. Gosport Navy Yard is a great example of that. And Brooklyn Navy Yard was actually the New York Navy Yard. It's a long story. Maybe I'll give a lecture about that one day. So anyway, in 1846, the Mexican War will break out, and good old Tattnall is going to take command of a paddle wheel gunboat known as the Spitfire. So what the Americans have done is that they know the coastline of Mexico is very shallow, and so they want to have small-sized gunboats that can go up the rivers and capture some of these coastal towns. And in this case, it was the Tampico that he was after. And he his ship, the Spitfire, would become the flagship of David Connor, who is the commander of the squadron. He'll eventually be replaced by Matthew Galbraith Perry, but he's leading a campaign to capture small Mexican ports, which the Spitfire plays a major role in. That begins in 14 November. Good old Tattnall will then, when the U.S. Army comes down with Winfield Scott, the amphibious operation, which is shown here, he takes the Spitfire and attacks the major forts defending Veracruz, and he actually gets wounded in the arm. He doesn't care. He keeps on fighting. He's quite a dynamic officer. After the war with Mexico, he will go command once again the Charleston Navy Yard. He then will be promoted to captain. He then will be named flag officer and command the Far East Squadron with his flagship, the Powhatan. This is the Battle of Taku Forts. Now, if you all know your history, you know about the Second Opium War, and which is part of the Taiping Rebellion, and the Europeans and the Americans are trying to take advantage of the disruption in Chinese government to force the trade of opium into China so that they could win the balance of trade, okay? So this is on the Peiho River, which leads to Tenzin, which then leads to Peking. The British, under Admiral James Hope, is going to be operating outside the Taku forts. Actually, the Americans will purchase the Towi, which is a steamer in Hong Kong, which they arm, and they go up the Peiho River, and they run aground right under the guns of the Taku forts. They are rescued by British barges and taken to safety. I mean, and the next day, the British go and tackle the Taku forts. Now, they don't look anything like this, but it's a dramatic picture. So the British will come in, and they will come in at the wrong tide, and two of their ships run aground. Admiral Hope is badly wounded, and so and there they are. And so Tattnall says, well, we're going to take the towaway, and we're going to go in and rescue those Brits. And that's exactly what they do. And they actually, some of the sailors come back on board darkened with powder, right? In other words, they've been firing their cannons to protect the British. They are able to get Hope to safety, and they go again to just say hello to the Taku forts, silence them. And someone came up to Tattnall and said, how can we do this? We're we're neutral. And Tattnall tells Stephen Decatur Trenchard, taps his wrist and says, blood is thicker than water. That's where that little line gets coined, and everyone goes, wow, you're great. And so he is given a sword by Queen Victoria for just making that statement. And then he is feted at a dinner by President Buchanan when he returns to the United States. Tattnall is then going to be assigned to be commandant of the Sackett's Harbor Navy Yard, and there's the Powhatan. It's a paddle wheel ship, and this is Sackett's Harbor, of course. Very important during the War of 1812. We still don't trust the Canadians, so we're building forts and building ships on the Great Lakes just in case they cause some trouble, and which we were ready for. At least Tattnall was. So Tattnall, I have to tell you, whoops, I'm going to get to that. So here's Tattnall. When the Civil War breaks out, he reluctantly resigned his commission and joined the Georgia State Navy and then the Confederate Navy. He handles a group of small steamers during the Union's attack in November 1861 on Port Royal Sound. And of course, he takes these tugs and put one cannon on it, and there's nothing they can do fighting larger ships. And so he then, of course, when the Battle of Hampton Roads begins, especially March 8th, the real hero of that battle is, of course, Franklin Buchanan. And so after the victory, even though Buchanan's badly wounded, he will send a letter to Buchanan, and it says, I congratulate you, my dear friend, with all my heart and soul on the glory you have gained for the Confederacy and yourself. The whole affair is unexampled and will carry your name to every corner of the Christian world and be on the tongue of every man that deals in salt water. That which I admire most in the whole affair is your bold confidence, which you undertook, an untried thing. You don't know how much you have aided in removing the gloom with recent military events had cast over us. And that's, of course, the battle, the sinking of the Congress in Cumberland. Now, he's wounded, and of course, they need a new commander. So on March 17th, Tattnall will be named the commander of the James River defenses, with the Virginia as his ship, and or as his flagship. And Tattnall, of course, when he takes command, he's told by Stephen Russell Mallory that do not hesitate to take command in the battle to the enemy, right? Do not hesitate to or wait for orders, but strike when, how, and where judgment may dictate. Well, so Tattnall is ready, but he knows that Hampton Roads is no longer like it was when Buchanan had the attack on March 8th. Because they have the Monitor there, they have the Galena there, they have the Naugatuck, and part of the North Atlantic blockading squadron. So actually, Tattnall will try to, no, see, ooh, I get overexcited with this thing. The Monitor is going to be right here. That's its anchorage. It's right next to what we call Fort Wool today. It also used to be known as the Rip Raps or Castle Calhoun. Of course, the Federals control it. They don't like calling it Castle Calhoun because it's named for, John C. Calhoun, the secessionist. So anyway, so the Virginia is down here. It spends 4 weeks in dry dock, and so on April 11th, Tattnall brings it down, right, to here and tries to challenge the Monitor to a battle. While he's, steaming around, he will have the CSS Jamestown capture 2 schooners, and then he realizes that the Monitor is not going to take the bait. Now, the big thing is, you see, Tattnall knows that the Federals have rams in the deep water right off of Old Point Comfort, right where the Hampton Roads joins the Chesapeake Bay. Those rams include a ship known as the Vanderbilt. And the Vanderbilt, of course, was outfitted by Cornelius Vanderbilt and was reinforced bow. So the idea was the Monitor will cause the Virginia to try and go out into the deep water so the Virginia can sink the Monitor, and instead it would be rammed by the Vanderbilt and other ships. Ramming, who brought ramming into popularity? Well, the Virginia did. So, they thought, well, we'll sink it with our rams. But he doesn't take the bait, and as a result of it, he will still will keep his ship active. He has to, he comes out again on several different occasions. Every time the Monitor doesn't take the bait, and as a result of that, Tattnall is frustrated. Here's the beau idea of a naval officer, and he can't find anyone to fight, and that's pretty bad. One evening, according to the official records, something that Tattnall wrote, that night we slipped down the roads and were soon passing Fort Monroe on our way out to the Chesapeake. Presently, our Army signal officer began waving his lantern, communicating with our distant batteries, and then told the results to Officer Jones, that's Catesby Ap Roger Jones, and that basically they were ordered to return. Right now, here he is. I think if you all know where Fort Monroe is, right? So he's right where the Chamberlain is, getting ready to get into deep water because Robert E. Lee had been, and Robert E. Lee's brother, Sidney Smith Lee, was then commandant of the Gosport Navy Yard. So his brother, Robert, sends all these messages. You need to attack the Union transports at the mouth of the York River because McClellan has already brought his huge army down. So this is what Tattnall is actually going to try to do. He's got the right tide, everything, and it eventually would end up. Now, I have to tell you, Tattnall did say about his ship that with each stroke of the engine, we did not know whether we go forward, stop dead in the water, or turn turtle. right? She was really unstable. So consequently, this was a big risk. But to destroy the transports of McClellan's army besieging Yorktown would have changed the outcome of the war in many ways. But Tattnall's order to return, of course, his ship goes back into dry dock. They said, Aston Ramsey, the chief engineer, said we couldn't be a day or two away from a dry dock because the engines were faulty. She had been placed 790 tons of iron on top of the sheer hull, and as a result of that, she's top heavy, right? Or comproquitted by the weight. That's a great quote. This is showing the Jamestown, which is right there, capturing 2 schooners. When the Virginia comes out, this is on April 11th, and I have to tell you, Tattnall's so disgusted that when he turns to go back to Gosport Navy Yard, he fires a gun to windward that says, you guys are chickens and you should have attacked. You should have had a battle. But they didn't. So as a result of this, Abraham Lincoln is going to come down, and I think I've told that story many times, but comes down and threatens the capture of Gosport. Now, what he's doing is he's trying to get the Navy to open up the James River, which had been closed by the existence of the Virginia. And Tattnall's maintaining his ship as active as he possibly can. So as a result of this, Lincoln will realize that once the Confederates retreat from Yorktown, that leaves Norfolk isolated. And so he wants the Navy to do something. So actually, the Navy will send, this is April 8th, will send a squadron up, or flotilla, up into the James River to fight against Fort Boykin and Fort Huger, and then to attack Sewell's Point. That's where the Monitor is. And the Monitor, when the Virginia comes out, Tattnall is on the gun deck. He says, men, we will sink the Federal ships today. We'll sink them even if hell's on the other side, we will sink them. And he then says, go to your duty stations and I'll go to mine. Well, he goes up on the hurricane deck, right? And he sits in the easy chair and directing everyone action. Now he's heading straight for the Monitor. The Monitor turns around, retreats. So Tattnall's really disgusted with this. He wants to have a battle. His plan is to board the Monitor and, take them like they used to take ships during the War of 1812. I mean, remember, he's a cutlass expert, and he also is quite a person to deal with. So anyway, because the Union ships have defeated Fort Boykin and Fort Huger, this will mean for General Huger, who's in command of the Department of Norfolk, has said to the Virginia, to Tattnall, you need to stay here as long as you can. We need your support. But without telling Tattnall, Huger will take his whole command and retreat. So on the morning of May 10th, the Tattnall, of course, everyone wakes up, and so they'll look, and there are no Confederates at Craney Island. There are no Confederates at Sewell's Point. In other words, they have all retreated, heading to Suffolk and then to Norfolk. And so here's the Virginia without any backup. So what is Tattnall supposed to do? Well, he has a couple of options before him. Number one, he can attack the Union fleet and go down game, as they say. In other words, he's going to sink some Union ships. His ship probably will get sunk, but he doesn't care, right? That's the best way to, if you're going to lose your ship, do it in action. And then some of the officers said, no, we can't do that. And so instead, he says, well, let's take it to Richmond. Everyone goes, oh, no, we can't do that. And the pilots say, well, you got to get, at this time, the draft of the Virginia was 23 feet. And you have to lighten the vessel to 18 feet to get it over what's known as the Harrison Bar, so that it can be a floating battery. And then the other thing they could do is just blow it up. Well, Tattnall decides that we're going to lighten the ship. And so at 2 a.m. on the morning, they will actually get close to 18 feet. And so they go to the pilots. Pilots put their fingers up in the air and says, oh, the wind is blowing from the west, blowing the water over the bar, and therefore you got to get it down 5 more feet. Well, it's 2 a.m. We can't do that. And so as a result of this, the Virginia, this is May 11th, 1862, the Virginia Tattnall decides they're going to run on the ground at Craney Island, and then they blow her up. And, what a sad finish to such a bright beginning, one Confederate said, with the destruction of the Virginia. Abraham Lincoln sees it blows up from Fort Monroe and says, she had been a thorn in our side for such a long time. Now she is gone. Now the Confederates are all shocked. Here's their ironclad that's defending Richmond, and they don't have it anymore. And they start looking at Tattnall, right, and thinking, well, you've done, very bad. Now, Tattnall will write a piece for the Richmond Inquirer trying to defend himself. For myself, I am only satisfied that the destruction of the Virginia was necessary at the time and place it occurred. But I assert that her destruction at that time saved the city of Richmond. The people had trusted that the existence of the Virginia ensured our blockade of the James River. And although the gallant and energetic officers of the Patrick Henry and Jamestown were working hard at Drury's Bluff, yet the means at their command were insufficient to render the position impassable. And so when the news came, the Virginia is destroyed, everyone panicked. They tried to work in hot haste, as Tattnall wrote. And so by that time, the crew and officers of the Virginia show up at Drury's Bluff. They build 5 more gun emplacements. They mount several guns, including 2 Brook rifles. And so when the Federals attack Drury's Bluff, they will be able to defeat the Federal attack. I say that the destruction of the Virginia required the exercise of a moral courage which will outlive any court of inquiry. And I'm proud to have been one of her crew from beginning to end, but the proudest moments in that connection with her were those in which I saw the flames burst from her hatches, and I felt the enemy's tread would never pollute her deck. Right? In other words, sink before surrender. Remember, that's the big line that I use all the time. In fact, this book is entitled "Sink Before Surrender." So anyway, I had to show that off. He then goes through a court of inquiry, and because someone's got to be blamed, and so his conclusion in his defense. Thus perished the Virginia, and with her high-flown hopes of naval supremacy and success. That denunciation, loud and deep, should follow in the wake of such an event might be expected from the excited masses on occasions of the vast public urgency made their wishes the measure of their expectations, and recognize in the public men no criterion of merit but perfect success. But he who worthily aspires to be a part in the great and serious affairs must be unanswered by the clamor. looking to the right, judging few for the present support, and patiently waiting for a calmer time, which reflection shall assume the general sway, and by judgment of all, the full justice through truly will be done to his character and motives and conduct. Well, Tattnall has said, well, you're innocent, right? And so he then is sent down to Georgia, where they're building ironclads. In fact, one of those ironclads is the CSS Atlanta, right? This is built on the hull of the Fingal, which has Scottish-built engines. It's actually it's a pretty special ship. The Tiff brothers, who make the conversion, don't do it very well, but nevertheless, we'll see that Tattnall is under pressure to attack. Well, he makes one effort to come down into Wassaw Sound below Savannah, because there's no ironclads there. And so basically, he slowly comes down St. Mary's River, right? And he sends a picket boat out in front. Now, they're rowing ahead of the Atlanta, which only goes 5 knots. But the big thing is a midshipman takes off his coat and hands it to some of the seamen, and said, be careful with that. There's a gun in the pocket. And so what do? They grab the gun, say, we ain't going to fight with Atlanta. We're going to go and tell the Yankees we're coming. They were Irishmen. They didn't really want to be there. Nothing against Irishmen, by the way, but nevertheless, so Tattnall's frustrated. Oh, he can't stand it because this was his great time to strike. Well, he'll try to strike once again, and the tides change, and actually 2 monitors will be signed to Wassaw Sound, the Nahant and the Weehawken. And so Tattnall, because of tides, does not attack. And so Stephen Russell Mallory's mad and says, well, you need to attack. So instead of being commander of the Atlanta, you're now going to be in command of the Savannah Station, building ironclads. And I'm going to put a new guy in charge, Richard Page, who was cousin to R.E. Lee, a popular guy. Once he got on the Atlanta, he said the quarters were like a jungle. There was water dripping. It was humid. It was pretty bad. So anyway, he will continue working on the Midgeville, but William Webb will take command of the Atlanta, and basically he will steam down into Wassaw Sound, and in 15 minutes his ship will be hit 5 times, 3 times by 15-inch shot, 2 times by 11-inch shot, and guess what? The Atlanta surrenders because it runs aground. So, in other words, Tattnall was having judicious efforts to try and engage the Federals in the best for his ship. Actually, Webb was told, look, the Midgeville is going to be ready to fight in 15 days. But Webb doesn't wait. He's, impetuous, I think. And so Tattnall will remain in Savannah for the rest of the war. He completes 2 ironclads, the Savannah and the Midgeville. However, he also sees their destruction when Sherman captures Savannah. Tattnall will then go to Nova Scotia, and he only survives up there by the kindness of British naval officers who give him money because of what he did in the Peiho River when in command of the Powhatan. Remember, blood is thicker than water. Well, after 3 years, the city of Savannah will actually invite Tattnall to come back to Savannah and they set up a new position, a sinecure, as collector of port duties. And so Tattnall returns to Savannah, and he will then die in 1871. This is a mythical meeting between Franklin Buchanan and Josiah Tattnall about the use of the Virginia. So Tattnall could have been one of the greatest officers in U.S. naval history. However, he will be, he joins the Confederacy. He will actually not have the same success as he did in the U.S. Navy, and instead he is almost a forgotten naval officer, despite what he did during the War of 1812 at Craney Island. He got a sword from Georgia for that. When he said blood is thicker than water, he gets a sword from Congress, right? Gold sword. That's nice. Also a sword from Queen Victoria. That's even nicer, right? This guy was a hero, a beau ideal of a naval officer. And so when we think about naval officers during the Civil War, you have to remember that he follows the thought that he would sink before surrender. Thank you.